Hey guys. Okay, so today I want to just sit down and very casually have the opportunity to have my buddy John Schilt here, who is very smart not only as an athlete but as a PA and in sports physiology. And we've known each other for quite some time, done a lot of training together, as well as I coached him for a couple years. And so while he's in town here, we had a chance to sit and chat about some things that I came up with this winter, and I got his input, and it's kind of fun to sit and chat with people about your ideas and things that you do. So I wanted to bring you all in on that conversation. We're going to keep this really casual. But this winter, I'm always all about looking at athletes as a whole and, looking in our sport as well as looking outside of our sport and how can we do what we do better and, looking at what has been done well, but what some limitations have been. And so this winter I really stepped back and came up with what I felt like was within triathlon, a really good off-season strength and conditioning program. And how we're gonna, how are we going to make a change in the athletes? Because we see typically the same thing over and over again every winter. Everyone has an off season, and then they maybe do a little bit of cross training, and then they get into a short period of a basic strength program where maybe they include some yoga or some Pilates, and then they maybe do 4, 6 to 8 weeks worth of your basic core and something like 3x10, 3x15, lightweight, high rep, that kind of thing. They do a bit of a strength program, and then they get into their winter training and then into their race season. Some of them, depending on the climate or where they are, how that is, and that's been repeated year after year, and seen some success, some not. And I thought, but there has to be a way we can do this better. What are the things that we're seeing over and over again in athletes in our sport? That's limiting them, injury. We talk about, there's been reverse periodization through, trying to raise athletes' top end. So there's been, a lot of trial and error with, doing the really high intensity or the power stuff, sport specific through the winter, reverse periodization, bringing them into their race season that way. And I looked at, the pitfalls of that and what's good of that. And so first off, the first thing I did is I came up with this, and I can see it in front of me, and maybe it's something I'll share at some point with this is, let's look at the athlete as a whole. What are we looking at? So I came up with all these different things, and it's just a real, John and I can see it sitting here in front of me. It's this real, gender, age, nutrition, adaptability, mental attitude, body type, discipline, finances, background, environment, gear, equipment, time management, life stress, mental toughness, your blood panel, coachability, your support system, consistency and commitment level, the sport that you're training for. And then I went a little bit further in the circle and looked at even more of the athlete: agility, speed, body composition, coordination, flexibility, power, mental skills, strength, quickness, power to weight, mobility, strength, endurance, threshold, ability to clear lactate, VO2, endurance, skills, technical, your ability to recover and absorb, durability, injury, and illness. So these are all things that, in my mind, if I was just going around, what are all these things that make us as athletes and what's important in our sport? And so the other thing you'll see is athletes often, they'll take a huge off season and then they kind of go in January, boy, I better get at this. And so that was the other thing that I wanted to address. How do we basically, my idea is, how do we make a better house to work with through the winter so that as we come into our spring and into our summer, and the race seasons are getting longer and longer. That's the other thing. I mean, triathlon used to be sort of from May, June till October, and then that was it. But now we're racing, long course races from March all the way until December. Mm-hmm. So we need, faster paces to qualify. You're asking professionals who have been in the sport or elite amateurs who have been in the sport for over 5 years. Maybe they race multiple Ironmans a year. So these are all things that I was, you see injury breakdown, you see, ultimately our event is a strength and endurance event, and so you see the athletes getting smaller and smaller, their immune systems, their testosterone, injury rate, their window of you know, the percentage of the ceiling that they're working with. So that we call that, you want to, in long distance racing, you want to work at a very high percentage of your threshold for a long period of time and burn fat for as long as possible and be very efficient and economical at that. And then, of course, it's been addressed with the reverse periodization that there is, we need to raise that ceiling so then we can work at a higher, we have a higher ceiling to work at that percentage to work with in the season. So that's been addressed through, the high intensity or the power stuff in the winter that's sport specific. Now, what I looked at when I was thinking about that was a couple things happen. Athletes come into form really, really early, and then they lose it. It's an aerobic engine change, not a structural change in the athlete, as well as there is a really high risk with the elite male athletes as far as testosterone levels dropping. The body is still getting smaller and smaller. So you're not structurally changing like the strength of the connective tissue, the deep strength of the muscle cells, all these things that I think we can, would be better off that we change that through the winter, that we don't come out of the spring basically firing on all cylinders and then falling off a cliff sort of mid-season like June or July.
It's a large durability issue really is what happens over the season. You just start becoming less and less, durable throughout the year, and that's when you start losing some of that connective tissue and you start getting all the itises that we see with folks. Yeah.
Right. And the other part of it is we're constantly with endurance sport trying to change our body composition. And we all know that the more lean muscle mass you have to work with over a long period of time, the better your body composition is going to be. So that's the other thing. So as we get slower and slower with endurance sport, relative. I mean, we're talking about like 5-second immediate power and top end, white fiber, fast twitch, that kind of stuff. We really train that away, which, for the new athlete, for that first 3 years of an endurance athlete, that's fine. You want this huge aerobic base and you need to learn how to do that, become very efficient and economical and how to, it is a long, just, you want to aerobically be able to handle the distance over and over again. What we're talking about is more the athletes who have been in this sport for over 5 years, females, males over 35 years old, people who are racing multiple long distance races a year and really, trying to go faster and faster at them. So this is that type of issue. So the very first thing that I have the program written out where it's a 3-month program. So it starts, you have your off season, you have and like we talked about this, the prep phase that everyone sort of uses as their actual strength phase traditionally in our sport. And what John brought to my attention with that especially is I'll let you explain when we started talking about this, why it's so important that we don't just stop there. Well, so we do the prep phase.
What do you see? Like, how long do most of the athletes typically tend to create that strength program? I mean,
so for the most part, it's people they get going in the gym and they lift weights for somewhere between 3 and 8 weeks, and then they stop.
Yeah, and the thing is, what we know, really in medicine is that really, the first 3 to 4 weeks is really just a neuromuscular change. Really, there's no actually change in the muscle size. And so really in that first 3 to 4 weeks, you're just getting muscle fiber recruitment. And so, you're not really making a true, physical change, and so, it sounds like, if you're only doing 6 weeks, you're barely just getting to the place where you're actually making the muscle cell, the muscle fiber change, which is what you're wanting, which is going to create the power. And that's a very well-known concept in medicine.
And that was so this was the most important thing to me when I was looking at things is we need to actually change the athlete. We need to do something different, that we actually make a change. And now, of course, we know, the first thing that'll come to people's mind is, well, I don't want to get really big. So that was the other part, is that we want to change the strength and the power and the ceiling of the athlete through the winter without an increase in size in the athlete of more than, let's say, on a range, 5 to 7 pounds, somewhere in there. And so, because this is a periodized program that's over 3 months, the initial part, yes, there is going to be a little bit of weight gain, which is fine through the winter anyways. It's good for the immune system. It's good for recovery. It's good for all kinds of different reasons for long course racing. If you're at race weight all year, it's a problem anyway. So that initial weight gain at the beginning of the periodization is expected and normal. But then as we go through the periodization of the strength training program, and then the last phase of it, there really won't be that much size gain, but there should be a huge amount of strength, power, change in actual muscle cell recruitment. All that stuff is actually, there's going to be a change in the athlete that we come out of the winter with more to work with. So that first we do, to me, the prep phase should, because we're going through a 3-month phase, the prep phase should be about 3 weeks. And it is that, the very basic stuff, getting used to the range of motion. In particular, I came up with a series of mobility exercises that I feel are really important for the triathlete. I mean, we need good hip extension to run well. We need, really flexible through our hips, but very strong in our core to be able to ride in time trial well over a long period. Like we say, Ironman's about who breaks down the least. So, we start with a mobility program in line with the basic prep phase, get the body ready to handle it, handle this, go through the soreness a little bit of just starting some body weight stuff.
So what kind of things, what does it look like, for instance, if you're going to start somebody on this?
So first off, it would be, a very specific set of mobility drills, a very specific core routine, and then some lightweight exercises where depending on the athlete might be, 3x12, 3x15, that type of, some very specific exercises. It shouldn't take a really long time, but it's just, just a prep phase of lightweight, get the range of motion, get the body ready.
How many days a week are we kind of?
So for most athletes, for the more serious athlete and the ones that have the time and the ability to handle it, 3 days a week. But at least 2 days a week. It needs to be at least 2 days a week.
And we're still and for the athlete, are they still able to do some of their other activities?
Yeah. So this was the other piece of the puzzle is the things that one of the mistakes that I see made a lot is that not understanding how to periodize the swim, bike, and run appropriately with the strength training programs. So really understanding, obviously, as we come out of our off season, we go into the prep phase. You're probably just getting into your basic repeatable week again, getting a maintenance program, getting back in your routine, getting just the swim, bike, run, getting your momentum going, getting just getting your feet under you. All that happens together, and then as we go into the next phase, which this is where I think it's really important to understand. What do you do with your run? What do you do with your bike? And what do you do with your swim as you periodize the strength? Because if we take that piece of the puzzle and we get it wrong, then we're not going to get the benefits out of the swim, bike, run, or strength program. So those all very importantly have to mesh together. Again, what's our goal? To really see a change in the athlete through this. The winter to me is going to be about changing the house that we're working with.
Correct.
So we come out of the winter with a completely different house to work with. So after we've gone through that, phase 1 is going to be, you might do a test going into it just to see what your baselines are. See what your baseline in the gym is as far as what's your 1 rep max on these certain set of exercises that I think are important. And then we'll also do, a bike test, a run test, a swim test, and just get your baselines.
And this is just right after that nice prep phase where you're doing low weights, more range of motion, kind of get through that early initial stages of soreness and things like that, and get into the routine again.
Yeah, just so we've maintained, we know we can roll through our repeatable weeks when bike and run, get a little bit of frequency and consistency going. We've got, the prep phase with the gym, the mobility, the core work going. So now we're ready to get into the next phase, which is once you know what your current 1 rep max is, I'm looking for you're going to be working at that, 80 to 85% range of what your current 1 rep max is. So, it's going to be lower repetitions. So we're looking from 6 to 8 repetitions, 3 to 4 sets, very specific exercises, but very important that we're working at a percentage of the 1 rep max, of the current 1 rep max. And so that is something that hasn't been addressed that much. People tend to just stick with the lightweight high rep. And the thing I see about that is that we're already endurance athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are doing sets of 2 by 25 high rep lightweight, we're doing the same thing we always do.
Right.
We're just getting really, really sore from it and working more endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was looking at is, well, I want to change the strength and the power of this athlete. So we have something new to work with as far as, force in the water, pressure on the pedals, ability of breakdown on the run and power. So, we're working at, 3 to 4 sets of 6 by 8, 85% of your 1 rep max. Now, when we're working with heavy weight, of course, the run volume needs to be frequency orientated. The part that I address in my program is that's the time to work on agility. Again, we lose, as triathletes, we get very, very efficient as going in a straight line. And we lose all agility. We lose the ability to move from side to side. We lose the ability to, move forwards and backwards quickly. So the run frequency, if you're trying to run a lot while you're trying to lift heavy, the two are going to counter one another. Yeah. So you're not truly going to be lift heavy enough to make a change, and you're going to be too sore to run a lot.
So we're really in that phase where the whole purpose of this is really not after the swim, bike, run yet. We're really wanting to address getting stronger,
exactly.
Building the house stronger. Don't sacrifice that session. So really we're still in that early season phase where...
Exactly. We're talking about December, November, December. So depending on when your race season ends. So you're looking months down the track before a race. So we let, if I take, the gym now, we're working, 85% of 1 rep max, higher weight, still working the mobility. The run's going to be about frequency and agility. The bike, because we're, working this really high load in the gym, somewhere in that, like I say, you look at an athlete as a whole, somewhere in there needs to be the neuromuscular quickness needs to be coming from somewhere. So we got the agility on the run. And this is where we really, really light high RPM stuff on the bike.
High cadence.
Yeah, high cadence pyramids, that kind of stuff. Really get the legs firing, being able to turn over, the quickness in the body. We're not, again, if you're in the gym lifting heavy for the first time, you're not going to be able to apply a lot of force on the bike. And it's too far from your race season anyways to be doing threshold or tempo or VO2 or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, you're going to, if you come off your off season and try and do that kind of load of work, a couple things are happening. You're going to get sick, you're going to get injured. Right. If you can handle it, you're probably going to come into form in 2 weeks and you're 6 months out from racing, so that's a mistake. So we really want to make sure that, high cadence, again, if everyone thinks, oh, I'll do the big gear work. Well, for most athletes, if you're trying to do that in the gym, the big gear work's going to take away from the gym. It's not the time for it, and what you're going to get out of that in this phase, again, just like the run volume, they're going to counter one another.
So this is very aerobic work. I mean,
so it's high turnover on the bike, agility and frequency on the run, and so now, again, looking at the athlete as a whole, where's the aerobic engine going to continue to come from? And usually you're in the dead of winter at this time, so we swim a lot. We swim the other strokes, swim volumes high, frequency, technique. Maybe you're making some changes in your stroke, working the other strokes, and make the swim volume really high. So you're not letting go of all your fitness. The fitness and the aerobic engine is going to happen in the water. The neuromuscular development and the quickness is going to come on the bike. Frequency and agility on the run. And then we're in a phase where we're really trying to make a change in the strength in the gym.
Because at this point, as we said, we're already beyond the 4 weeks, and we can actually start getting some of that muscle size change, which is what we're after.
Exactly.
Which is going to create that explosive strength that we're looking for.
Exactly. And then the other thing that in my program that I emphasize is some of the things that aren't addressed that often in our sport is how to lift. So the tempo, right? It's making the form very correct, but also, slow and controlled on the way down, and then boom, power on the way back up. So that 2-to-1 ratio, in other sports, that's it's addressed all the time. For some reason in our sport that's been lost a little bit, but it's a very important piece of it where it's very that 2-to-1 ratio, slow and controlled. On the eccentric, whether it's letting it out or down, so you're getting the eccentric load, which is very important in our sport. In the back half of the marathon, really developing that, the lengthening of the muscle, handling that, very important for injury prevention and rehab. And then the explosive out of the, so if we're talking about something, let's say, for instance, leg press or squats, where it's explosive out of the movement, so it's the 2-to-1 ratio. So this phase, depending on the athlete, may last anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, and that's going to be really dependent on the athlete and their experience level and the changes that you're seeing in them. From there, I recommend a 3 to 4 week phase where, so at the end of that, do another test. So you do a new 1 rep max test, you do a new bike test, new swim test, new run test, see if where the changes are. So hopefully for the men, the testosterone's come up a little bit. For the women, the strength has come up a little bit. The body composition has changed a little bit. Hopefully we're seeing some actual changes in the cells that we talked about, the recruitment of neuromuscular from the agility and from the load.
And you physically are likely going to see some size difference, especially in quadriceps and things like that.
Yeah, and this time of year, people, triathletes, we're funny about our bodies if we see all of a sudden a little bit of size. But remember, we're talking about November, December. So if there is, like I say, that 2 to 7 pound weight gain in size, we're talking about muscle. So that's okay and healthy at that point in the year for an endurance athlete, and I think actually necessary. So after this phase, then we would go into just a phase where we go to the lightweight high rep and just a bit of maintenance, and we're going to really focus on the posterior chain and the core. And this is going to be a period, because we're talking about maybe January, February, where we're going to bring the run volume up, and we're going to do some really long runs, snowshoes, that kind of stuff. Really continue to work on the agility, your core, posterior chain on the athlete, and just sort of, bring it away for about 3 or 4 weeks. And this is where we can work some sport-specific strength, paddle work in the water, some big gear stuff on the bike, some hill running, some endurance on, bring the run volume up, and just see if the force of everything has changed, if the durability on the back half of these long runs and the ability to handle the run volume at a low aerobic heart rate is better. See if the force in the water and on the pedal stroke is a little bit better. Just remove that for about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the athlete. Again, maybe for someone it might be a little bit longer. But sort of, this phase is a little bit shorter than the phase before. And then in that period, for a fairly experienced athlete, if you want to have a little bit of body weight plyometrics, I think that's a good idea. You have to be a little bit careful with that with someone who isn't that experienced. So we're talking about, the elite amateurs and professionals. That would be the time that I'd recommend, adding a little bit of plyometrics to it as well. And then what we would go into in the final phase, which should be, similar type. Again, this is all really dependent on the athlete. So, it depends how quickly they respond, that kind of stuff. So, again, sort of 4 to 6 weeks long, where we go really, really heavy load. So this is going to be 90 to 95% of your new 1 rep max. And we're still an endurance sport, so I looked at it. The volume still needs to be high, but we want the force and the load to be very high. So it's a really heavy load of work with maximum amount of rest. So we're looking at a set like 6x2. And, to any endurance athlete, you say you're going to do 2 reps of something. You're like, 2?
Yeah.
It is 2? And but you're going to do 6x2 at 95% of now your new 1 rep max that we've established. And so that, when you start to really get into it, you should really feel the load on that. You're going to feel a real change in strength and power and connective tissue. Again, focusing on the 2-to-1 ratio, on coming down. Going to continue to work the core through all of these, the posterior chain. And now, because we've been through all of this coming into it, the running might be still You're going to bring the length of the long runs down, but you might be able to handle still a little bit of strength specific running, like hill running and frequency, and keep the volume, not high, but normal.
Hmm.
The bike, you might start to, for an experienced athlete, be able to work tempo and a little bit of sport specific strength and still one session a week with the neuromuscular quickness. But it truly needs to be tempo, not threshold. If we start to go into any hard sets on the bike, your legs are just going to be too hollow.
Hmm.
It's going to take something out of the legs for the lifting, as well as the lifting isn't going to allow the athlete to truly do those sessions. So they really fight against one another, and it's not the time. So what you want to look for is that the work might be, 8 minutes up to 12 minutes up to 15 minutes at 70%, just tempo, rolling 90, 95%, or 95 cadence, really light, but starting to get the body ready for what's going to come after this on the bike. Like I say, the sport specifics or sport specific strength in the run, some, hill reps, keep them short, that kind of stuff. You hopefully your run fitness is quite high after the last phase, so you're able to handle that without it taking away. And the swimming can start to be more normal, where you're starting to address some speed sets, some threshold sets, that kind of stuff, because we're starting to get closer to our race season. The volume might have come down, we might have taken away like the other strokes, that kind of stuff, but we're starting to get more balance focused towards our racing. But in this phase, really, really important that the lifting is, like I say, the volume of the actual lifting is still quite high because you're looking at 6 sets, but we're only doing 2 reps every time. But it's 2 reps at 95%. So when you go down slow and controlled on an eccentric load at 95% of your 1 rep max, and then really power out of the bottom of that, you're making some significant changes to your body when you're doing that. And it's really key. The other part about us as endurance athletes, we're impatient.
Right.
We think, a lift, 1, 2, wait 30 seconds. Okay, lift, 1, 2, and it's like, no. You really need to take your time. Do 2, sit down, rest 2 to 3 minutes, do 2 again. So you want to give yourself enough rest because this is a max effort. And your question to me when I was explaining this to you originally was, typically what we've seen over the winter is people do sessions like power singles on the bike. And my response to that was, you said, well, if you do 15 or 10 by 1 minute, big gear, 53, 11, whatever, and really stomp down. I said, 1 minute.
That's a long time.
It's still endurance. You're not changing that real, pure, explosive strength. You're really not changing the tendons and ligaments as far from a structural durability and injury standpoint of view, because actually I think you're probably adding to breaking it down. I don't know if you would agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think because you're really not being able to apply truly the same type of contraction and explosive force on the bike as you do when you actually have, with weights and things like that. So yeah, you're really not truly changing that structure. You're kind of just adapting the same thing, which is what we're trying to get away from initially. So,
and that's the other thing, as I said, that like because we are endurance athletes, if you ask someone who's been an endurance athlete for over 5 years, let's say they've done 14 plus Ironmans, and you ask them to crank for 1 minute max effort, I can see over time we've seen many files on these athletes, and what they can do for 1 minute all out and what they can do for Ironman aren't that different.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to address. So when you put 90, when you address it under load, under weight, there is no choice but to change it. I mean, now we're talking about 5 seconds of 95% of your 1 rep max.
Right.
That is what I think initially what we're looking for out of those type of exercises, but the endurance athlete doesn't even really know how to really recruit the whole body and muscles to be able to do that and change the cell actually.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we we see this even through a couple years through athletes where they do create the large aerobic engine and it is necessary for what we do in our sport, but at some point that our bodies adapt to that and you actually need to change. And I think it's interesting. I think it sounds like this program maybe something is creating that change. Where yes, you build your big aerobic engine, but now you've got to you got to change your transmission a little bit here too. And
Again,
yeah.
that's what we're saying. Like this is something you do through the winter. So obviously, once you go through all these three phases, now you go into your spring. Hopefully, like I say, and then you'll be addressing, whether you go into a VO2 type phase
Mm,
or you go into now an endurance base building phase because it's spring where you are and you're going to
right.
log the miles, or whatever you have worked out or your coach has worked out for you. Now what are you going to, might be a very race specific phase if you're getting into some early season Olympic distances and half Ironmans, or whatever it is for you. But most importantly, that this was, like you just said, something we do over the winter for the athletes that have, they're starting to really max out what they're using, and we're wanting to make a change in that, like in the athlete, change their mobility, change their range of motion, change their power, change their strength, change their ceiling, without them peaking too early in the year
Mm,
and then falling off a cliff halfway through the year. For the men, watching that their testosterone, the race season's so long and hard on them already, and your immune system's beat down, your hormones are beat down. Even for the ladies, if there's issues of losing their menstrual cycle, all these things really gets beat down. If we just do high intensity all winter to try and change that, you're probably, like I say, what I've seen over and over again is that they do, you come into form for maybe April, May, and
mm,
then boom,
right.
halfway through the year, there's all kinds of illness and injury
Yeah, yeah.
issues. So yeah, this is something that we're trying to do through the winter to change the athlete that we're coming into the season with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was sort of, I mean, I'm going to just quickly flick through some of our notes. I did a talk on this with the Endurance Corner Camp, and we took some notes and just want to make sure that we've addressed all of them. Again, some of the common mistakes I talked about, or in a typical program that we see, is that a lot of athletes aren't lifting heavy enough to really make this change,
Mm,
and that's why we talk about the percentages. And the reason that happens is because there's a huge fear factor.
right.
Maybe you need someone to know how to write the programming, number one, but you also need someone who really truly understands how to show you these exercises.
And I think that's a really great point. I mean, we obviously see it in medicine a lot, and I think it's the fear for most triathletes because I would say a fair number of folks don't actually go to the gym, and and it is important to make sure that who you choose to have as your mentor in these things, whether it be a coach, that they understand the lifting side of things, because there is that adaptation phase in the first 3 to 4 weeks is crucial. If you don't get that in, I think that you're really kind of barking up the tree to have an injury, and you haven't even started your season yet. So, I think that the first 3 to 4 weeks is necessary, and you really do need to have someone who can at least get you through some of those things and give you those good full range of motion activities that will get you ready for that one rep maximum. And I think the biggest fear probably for all of us would be is that is the injury. This is I think your idea is completely different than anything that we've seen really in the sport per se, where we're actually trying to build this true power. Because in relative terms, what we do in triathlon is truly not that powerful, even if we look at other sports and things like that. So I think it's an interesting concept, and how do we approach this?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, it's the little things that you want to make sure that you have someone teach you the technique correctly, what kind of shoes to wear. I mean, you don't want to be going in the gym. Um, and I know I haven't actually told you what exercises yet or what the programming is. That is something that if you're interested, you can contact me directly. I can run you through that. But I just wanted to put this idea out there and
Mm-hmm.
this conversation out there. But understanding the type of shoe that you should be wearing, what the technique looks like, how these exercises should be done. I mean, these are all things that you do. They're like I say, this is for the advanced athlete, and you want to make sure you have someone good teaching you how to do this stuff. Um, Sorry, I'm just going to pull up. So we also had someone taking notes. Um, and I'll emphasize it again that it's very important that when you do this type of programming that you understand for each phase what swim, bike, and run should be accompanying these. That's really, really important. And so, again, going back to that, looking at the athlete as a whole, where is each system being worked and changed through this periodization so that we come out of we come out of this winter with a better swim, bike, runner with a better engine to work with.
Right.
And so it's, making sure that when you add this kind of programming, that you understand what type of biking to be doing with it, what type of swimming to be doing with it, that kind of.
Because in turn, we're really actually adding almost another sport into this, and so it's going to require appropriate recovery, and and obviously as a coach, you understand that every workout has it definitely is dependent on the previous workouts, and you can't stick two big hard sessions, and that's why it is important to realize that it sounds like during this phase, this is truly the lifting portion of it, and you're paying attention to your swim, bike, and run, but that is not the forefront of what you're trying to make better at the time. That'll come later in the year. Once you've built your strength, then you can handle, like you said, the endurance or the VO2 max sessions if you're doing shorter distance races and things like that. So
right, exactly. Um, and I think I mentioned this already, but really, this is very good for the older athletes
mm-hmm.
as well. Women, you know, women lose strength really, really quickly. And, endurance sport makes us, on the grand scheme of things, it makes us slow and weak. And that's what you see after a certain period of time when people have done multiple Ironmans and multiple Ironman seasons, and they have plateaued out there. I've maxed out my number of hours I can go. I train a lot of hours, and I really can't go any more hours,
right.
and I'm not getting any faster from this anymore. In fact, I'm starting to get slower from it. And so that's the issue, is that, as we get older, as we've been doing the sport longer, as we race endurance sport more often, and, so men over the age of 35, and most women, I think, just across the board,
well,
in particular.
And we know this as just physiologically that that is that happens as we get older. I mean, we're going to lose our muscle mass. We're going to lose our strength. And, so this is just a natural process. And so this is a great way to actually, as we get a little bit older, to address some of these things, because, I think it'd be really beneficial just even outside of triathlon.
Right. Cool. Thanks, John. I don't know that I have a lot more to add, but if this is something, I probably missed a whole lot of notes, but I just wanted to put it out there, something new, some different ideas, and I came up with these ideas through the winter. I've seen some good results already with a few athletes that I've actually put them through the program. We're seeing some really good results, as well as I presented at the spring EC camp, and the people in the audience who were a good audience, well-educated audience, were really interested and supportive and thought this was fantastic. And so just wanted to, and then when I chatted with John, who I respect, not only in the sport but also professionally, so we sat and chatted, and I thought this would be a good time to start to share a little bit of that there. Cheers. Thanks, guys.